Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to open up, disconnect, and remove a music and sound model MC902 intercom master station along with its separate amplifier and chime module. To do this, you're going to need a few basic tools. You're going to need a Phillips screwdriver. You're going to need a regular flat screwdriver. You possibly may need a pair of small needle nose pliers, or regular size ones will work too. You're going to need possibly a couple small nut drivers or something like this. Nut drivers are exactly what they say. They're little tools with openings that fit on specific size nuts, and you'll see what that may be for in the future. You're going to need a Sharpie of your choice. I have both red and black. The black is thick, the red is fine, and we'll use those. You're going to need some sort of tape. This is blue masking tape or painter's tape. Any kind of something to label things to write on is fine. This is what I have today. And ideally, some small container, little metal cup in this case, because that's what we use here in this shop, to put screws and things in as you take it apart. You'll notice here that the display is not lit up on the MC902 master station. That's because the very first thing that you absolutely must do is turn the circuit breaker off on the circuit that powers your master station, and we'll get to the reason why, but it is very important and you must do it, otherwise you're going to create a problem for yourself later on. The very first step is to unscrew the MC902 master station from the wall, and if you look really carefully, you don't see any screws. And if you open the door down here on the bottom, there's no screws down there either. So where are the screws? They're hidden behind the faceplate. So what you do is this center portion, all of this comes off. So if you grab it on the sides like this and you sort of pull and wiggle somewhat, if you have strong fingers you can do that. I guess mine are not that strong today. So you can use the flat screwdriver and sort of wedge it away from the wall just a little bit. Try not to scratch up the paint because otherwise you're going to get yelled at. And this just pops off pretty easily. See, that wasn't hard. So here's our faceplate. And you'll notice on the back of the faceplate, there are these little round black keepers. There's several of them. There's 5 altogether. 2 on this side, 2 on this side, 1 here in the center. And these actually come out and they kind of look like that. These are what hold the faceplate onto the front of the chassis, and they fit into these holes here. Sometimes when you pry this off, some of these will come out of the back of the faceplate and they'll be stuck in the holes in the faceplate like that. That's okay. Doesn't really make any difference. That's where you take your little needle nose pliers and you carefully reach in there and you wiggle and pull them and they pop right out. And then make sure you put it in the back of the faceplate again so it's ready to go. If you lose these, don't call and ask, because no, I don't have any. Once we've taken the faceplate trim off, now we can see the screws. There's one mounting screw here, and there's another mounting screw here. They're both Phillips screws. They screw into tabs on the metal wall housing that's mounted inside the wall behind the unit. Now, I'll warn you now, this unit, when we take these screws out, there's nothing really holding it onto the wall or into the wall housing any longer. It pretty much is just going to want to flop out. So you have to be ready for that when you go to take the screws out. As an aside, please just use a regular screwdriver. This is not the time to go get the cordless drill out of the garage. Just use a screwdriver because you don't want to break out the little indented parts of the plastic chassis that the screws head fit against. Otherwise, you won't be able to secure this back to the wall later on. And these will come out relatively easily. So I like to loosen one side first and then the other. Of course, this is easier to do if you're doing it in real life than if you're making a video. And I have to try to stand off to the side while I do this so you can actually see what's going on. So we'll take out the screws, loosen them up. What are we going to do with the screws? We're going to put them in our little metal cup. Listen for it, screw drop. And second one. Why is the little metal cup important? It's important because you would be surprised how many people call me. Well, I took my master station off the wall to send it to get it fixed, and I got it back and I can't find the screws. They're supposed to be in the little metal cup. Once we've taken the screws off, this just pulls forward and it tips down. Now on the back of the unit, and I'm just holding it up right now, there's this green wire that attaches here and here, so it's like a big loop. And in the top of the wall housing up here, there's kind of a hook. And if you hook this wire through the hook in the wall housing, and if I'll get a little bit lucky, you can balance it and it'll kind of hang. It's kind of a hokey design, but that's the way music and sound does it. Now, of course, while you're doing this and it's leaning up against the wall, if you have a painted wall or a wallpapered wall or whatever kind of wall you have, you don't want to scratch up the wall because, again, then you're going to get yelled at. What you can do sometimes is you take a cloth, this is just a shop rag, and you can put it between the bottom of the master station and the wall. It gives it a little more grip so it doesn't flop around so much, and it holds it away from the surface of the wall so you won't scratch it up. That's the way we would do this if we were doing this a service call at your house. Once you have it opened up like this, you have access to the back of the MC902 master station, and you get a little bit of a glimpse of what's inside the wall housing inside the wall of your house. The wall housing is this metal box that everything mounts in or onto. The first thing we need to do is we need to get the MC902 master station out of the way so we can work on stuff that's back in here, and that way you'll be able to see it better. There isn't really that much that you have to disconnect to remove the MC902. There's just a few cables, there's a couple wires, and I'm going to walk you through that one by one. So the first thing you're going to do is we're going to unplug the Chime module. The Chime module is this board up here in the corner, and there is this cable of 4 wires that come from the Chime module. We have red, orange, white, and black, and they come down here to this white connector, and it's plugged into a socket on the board right here, and actually printed on the board right next to the socket it says Chime, because that makes sense. All you have to do is take this and pull it up, and it unplugs just like that. The plug is index, it has these little shoulders on it, and so you can only really plug it in one way. If you turn it around so it's wrong, it won't go in because the shoulders are in the way. So we'll tuck that in the wall housing for right now just to get it out of the way. Immediately below that, this is where the Chime was unplugged, there's this other cable right here. And this cable comes from the amplifier, which is this unit inside the wall housing. And this has a multiple number of wires. We have black and purple and black and yellow and black and red and brown. And it's the same idea. It's got a little connector on the end and it's plugged into a socket and it unplugs just like that. Again, it has little shoulders on it so you can't plug it back in the wrong way. We'll tuck that out of the way for a second. So that's the first 2 things that we have unplugged. Now we have these 3 cables over here. Let's get this one out of the way. That's one we just unplugged. I'm just going to tuck it back underneath here so it's not in the way of you seeing. So we have these cables here. So we have this cable that has a whole bunch of wires in it, red, orange, purple, brown, green, blue, blah, 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 all that. And if we follow it up, it goes up to the socket on the terminal board. This board right here in the back of the wall housing with all the little screws and all the little different colored wires and everything, that's the terminal board. That's the board where all of the wires from all of your remote speakers throughout your house are connected. There are 3 plug-in connections that come from the back of the master station and plug into the terminal board. So we're going to unplug the first one first, and that's this one up here, and we unplug it. And when you unplug it, if you look at it for a second, it says room terminal on it. And it also says P3. P3 matches the labeling on the board up here as P3, which is the top connection. These 3 connections, we have P3, P1, and P2. All of the plugs are the same style, so in theory, you could plug them back in incorrectly, out of order, but they're all labeled, so why would you do that? So we unplug P3, and you'll notice that our master station is kind of dangling here. That's the problem with the green support strap. So we've unplugged that one. We're going to unplug the next one, which is P1. And now we're going to unplug the bottom one, which is P2. And I'll show you after how the terminal board is labeled so that you can correspond the plugs with the sockets and plug them in correctly. So those 3 are now disconnected. And one of the things that happens here is the more you disconnect, the less there is holding the set to the wall on the green strap. See, it wants to fall down all the time. So let me show you how to deal with that. A good way to deal with this problem is you need something to help support the master station while it dangles on its green strap. So what we're going to do is, take in this case, we're going to take a box. Just a plain old cardboard box, and I think it's about the right size. It's a little tall, but it's not too bad, just to help hold it up just a little bit. How big of a box do you need? I don't know. It depends on where your master station is mounted and how much space you have. If it's in the backsplash of your kitchen, it's not too bad. If it's on a wall all by itself, it's going to make it trickier. You could also enlist someone to help you, and they could hold the master station while you disconnect things. That's a good way to do it also. So we've unplugged all of that so far. Now the next thing we need to unplug is another cable that comes from this side of the back of the master station, and I'm going to tip this up here a little bit. It's this cable right here. It comes sort of from the same area as these last three that we unplugged. These three here, which is P1, P2, and P3. And this is a 3-wire cable. It has a heavy black wire. It has an orange wire and a brown wire. And it goes down to a plug and socket down here on the bottom of the amplifier board. And we're going to unplug that. And then you'll notice that there's also a black wire. There's our white plug from that cable. There's another heavy black cable that goes around to the left, and it plugs into a connection here at the top of the terminal board. So we'll unplug that. And that one's now disconnected. We'll keep this propped up on our box if we can, like that. And we're about halfway done now. So now we're going to deal with this side of the set. So here we have this red and white RCA plugs, and these come from some external or auxiliary music source. Perhaps in your installation below the master station you have the built-in CD changer, or maybe you have a built-in cassette player, or maybe these run off to your audio equipment in your living room or family room, and it's connected to your home audio equipment. These need to be unplugged, and before we do that, because there are a variety of places that these types of cables can plug in on the left-hand edge of this circuit board, and these are in the top two connections. And so this is the first chance we have to use our blue tape. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the blue tape around the cable like this. And we're going to use our Sharpie pen. And we're going to write on there, on the blue label, where these were plugged in. These are plugged into left and right auxiliary in. So if we write aux, AUX, in, and then it's not too hard to label on the other side that the red plug is the right, and the white plug is the left. And on the sockets they're plugged into, they're labeled as left and right, so it's easy to remember. Once you've labeled it, you can unplug these and put them out of the way. See, the more you disconnect, the easier it becomes. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to disconnect the two antennas. So this little box right here is the AM/FM tuner box, and we have two antennas connected to it. We have a single orange wire, and that's the AM antenna, and we have this flat twin lead wire, sort of a translucent white color. That's the FM antenna. And surprisingly enough, they're hooked to the FM antenna screws and the AM antenna screws. How about that? Now there's two ways you can do this. You can put blue tape on the wires and write on there where they go, or you can also write on the tuner box. The AM screws right here, so we could easily just write orange, or abbreviate it and put ORN because that means orange. And here we have the twin lead, which is the FM, and really all you have to do is put FM and then FM, because it doesn't really matter which way the antenna, the FM antenna, gets connected as long as it's on those two screws. So you could do the blue tape thing and write on it, or you could write it on the tuner box. That's okay too. The goal is for you to remember, so when you get the set back, you'll be able to hook it back up. And you can also refer back to this video. So we'll go ahead and loosen the screw. Use your Phillips screwdriver. We'll take the orange wire off and we'll loosen the other two screws and take the FM antenna off. And now we're almost done. The last thing we need to do is way down here in the bottom corner of the master station, that's a little hard for you to see, so I'm going to tip it up like this, right here. So here's our green wire, that's our loop strap. There's these three little white connectors here, which we're not worried about. And there's a little red connector here. It has three wires in it, a black, a white, and a red. And they go into this gray cable. And this is another connector that simply unplugs. It does have the little shoulders on it, so you can't plug it in wrong. Once you've done that, the set is now fully disconnected. You can release the little green loop strap thing, and you can take the master station and move it out of the way. Yay, because now this part is done, but we still have stuff to do in there, but this is out of the way. That makes that a lot easier. For the sake of clarity, anything that we have already disconnected that would be in the way of what we're working on or looking at now, I've pushed back up through the openings in the wall housing a little bit just to get them away from the front of all of this so it's easier for you to see. That would be our audio cables and our AM/FM antennas. Everything else is as it would be in your house. So let's review what we have here. On the left-hand side here, we have the Chime module. This is the board that makes the doorbell sounds when somebody pushes the doorbell buttons on your house. Here we have the terminal board, and this is the board where all of the wires from all of the remote speakers are connected. And here is the power amplifier and primary power supply that powers the entire system. So we have three separate items. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect and remove the Chime module. Now in some cases you may not need to send the Chime module, but in case you do, I'm going to show you how to take it out. The way Music and Sound designed these systems are the Chime module is held to the back of the wall housing, back of the metal box, with these little plastic standoffy things. They're not real great, they're not my favorite, but that's the way they did it. It sort of snaps over them. Unsnapping them sometimes is easy and sometimes is a little difficult. And what you have to do is you have to kind of reach up in there and grab it and pull it forward, and this one happened to pop off easily, which was kind of nice. That isn't always the case. Sometimes you've got to wrestle it a little bit, but they will pop off. And you'll see on our Chime module here, we have 4 screw terminals, and there are 2 wires connected to 2 of the screw terminals. One wire is connected to the screw that's labeled as common, and the other wire is connected to the screw that says 3-note. So this is a 3-note door chime. It can ring a single note, it can ring 2 notes, or it can ring 3 notes. There are also chime modules that have 1, 2, 4, and 8. Which one you have depends on what the installer put in when he did your installation. We need to disconnect these wires. So again, this is a good opportunity to use our masking tape, and we'll put the tape around the wire. And we're going to write on the tape that the orange, and remember orange is O-R-N, is to the common, which I'm just going to put COM because I know what that means. And the yellow goes on 3-note, like that. The other thing you can do, if you want to help yourself remember even more, is you can take your Sharpie and put a little bit of red on one screw, the common, and a little bit of red on the 3-note screw, because that helps remind you that, oh yeah, I marked those, and that's where the wires go. To disconnect the wires, use your Phillips screwdriver, loosen the 2 screws, and the wires simply pop off. When you go to reconnect these, because this is something people ask me all the time, it doesn't really matter which way you hook them up. You could flip them over and put yellow on common and orange on 3, and it'll work just the same. It doesn't make any difference. So now our Chime module is out, and we can put that aside. So now we're going to take a quick look at the terminal board. The terminal board is the second thing in the back of the wall housing, and we've talked about that a little bit already. And let's go ahead and take a close-up look at that. The nice thing about this design is that you don't have to do anything with this. This stays at your house. You don't disconnect the wires from it. You don't remove it from the back of the wall housing. You leave it just as it is, because we have this here at the shop. And so if you send me your master station for repair, I already have one of these to plug it into, so you don't need to take all this apart. And that's a good thing, because you have all of these different colored wires and they all have to go in the right connections. It's a lot to do and it's difficult for people, and you don't have to do that. But also I wanted to show you really quick the 3 sockets. Remember, we unplugged the 3 multi-wired cables from the 3 sockets on the terminal board. We'll get some of these wires out of the way here. We had P1, P2, and P3. That's these 3 sockets here. So here's P3, and on the terminal board next to it's printed as P3, so you know which one it is. Down here in the middle we have P1, and it says P1 here. And down here at the bottom we have P2, which it says next to it. Why they didn't make this as like 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, and 3, I don't know. It seems like it would make sense to me, but they didn't do it that way. You do have to be careful when you plug your set back in, because all 3 of these are the same. Same style socket, same style plug, and yes, it would be possible to plug them in wrong. Is it going to blow anything up? No. Is it going to make your system work incorrectly? Yes. So you have to make sure. And on the master station, the plugs are all labeled, so it's not that hard. And yes, now we're almost done. So the last thing we have to do is we have to take the amplifier power supply module out. Why do we have to take that out? Well, because the power supply portion, which is this side with these big round black things, this is what powers the MC902 master station. It also powers the amplifier, which is the part under the big black aluminum heatsink. And yes, these do fail, get blown up, things like that happen to them. So you have to send this with the 902 master station, because they're a pair. They work together, and you have to have both of them to work on either of them. Remember at the very beginning, I told you that you had to do the most important thing first, which was turn your circuit breaker off. The reason you have to do that is because right here, under this shiny metal plate, is the low voltage transformer that powers the entire system. The low voltage transformer is wired into your house electrical circuit, so it receives 120 volts from your electrical system, and then it reduces it down to 18 volts, which powers the amplifier power supply module, which then powers the MC902 master station. And there are actually 2 transformers under this plate, because it's a big system. This is a 60-watt amplifier, so it requires a lot of power, and the easiest way to do that is 2 reasonably powerful low voltage transformers. The way Music and Sound designs their transformers, inside of them, built into the inside of the transformer, down in here where you can't see, there are fuses to protect the transformers and protect the system. One of the things we have to do is we have to unplug the amplifier power supply module from the transformers. So this connection right here, this big white one, it has these wires here, which are 2 red, 2 black, and a green, and they go to the amplifier power supply module up here. And on this side, you have 2 yellow, 2 red, and a green, and these are the wires that come from the transformers down below the plate. If you unplug this, and more importantly, plug it back in, plug that back together while the circuit breaker is turned on and the transformers are powered up, you run the risk of blowing the fuses in the transformers. If you do that, then your transformers go dead. Then what you have to do is you have to disassemble all of this, no small thing to do, and then you have to ship the transformers to me so I can open them up, replace the fuses, and then send them back to you, and then you have to put this all back together. That's a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of trouble, not to mention the extra expense, because you didn't want to walk over and flip your circuit breaker panel off. So turn the circuit breaker off. Once it's off, you grab these and you unplug them, and now it's safe. Once you've unplugged the amplifier power supply module from the transformer, you can turn your circuit breaker back on. That's fine. This is only 18 volts. The connections inside this socket are recessed, so they're safe. If you're really worried about that, because sometimes people are, you can simply take a little bit of your blue tape and you can put it over the end of the socket like that and cover it up. And then you don't have to worry about it, especially, you know, if the grandkids come over, because you know they are. They're messing with everything. As a short review on the amplifier power supply module, if you go back, or if you were following along, get this out of the way here a little bit, you remember that there was a 3-wire cable with a white connector on it that came off the back of the MC902. That was this one. And remember, it had the extra black wire that plugged onto the connection on the terminal board, which is up here. This plug that we unplugged. Okay, this plug plugs into this socket down here on the bottom left-hand corner of the amplifier power supply module. That's where it came from. I know it was kind of hard to see because there was so much junk in the way, but that's where it is. Okay, and we're getting close to being done. We only have 3 more things to disconnect. We're going to remove this and you'll be all set. This part you have to pay attention to because it will be the trickiest part for most people. On the power supply amplifier module, there are wires that come off of it that send the audio signals to all the speakers in your house so it plays music. Those wires are connected to little connections up here, and I will show you this after we take this out so it'll be easier to see. If you look carefully, you'll see there are 3 white wires, and then there are 3 green wires, and going down here a bit are 3 purple wires. In this mock-up installation, this system only has 3 remote speakers. 3 remote speakers. So there are only 3 white, 3 green, 3 purple. If your installation has 8 remote stations, you're going to have 8 white wires, 8 green wires, and 8 purple wires. If you have a big giant house and you have 12 speakers, guess how many wires you're going to have? You're going to have 12 white wires, 12 green wires, and 12 purple wires. Are your wires going to be these exact colors? Maybe not, because these wires, these are the colors that Music and Sound provided. However, not all installations are perfect, typical, done correctly, and you could have different color of wires. The color of the wire doesn't really matter. What matters is that they get connected in the right spots. So you could easily have red wires, black wires, and brown wires. Doesn't make any difference. As I tell people, the electrons don't care what color the wire is. They just care about being connected to the right place. Hopefully yours will be done correctly and you have white, green, and purple. We have to disconnect these from screw terminals on the amplifier. It's not difficult to do, but it's a little hard to see. So I'm going to do this and show you, and then once we take it out, I'll show you again. Up here, you have these aluminum big screw connections. And we're going to do the green one first, which is right here, which you probably can see. And this is where your slotted screwdriver, your flat screwdriver, comes in. All you have to do is put it in the slot in the round part in the center and loosen it. And then you reach in there and the wires come out like this. Now, they're all twisted together, or they should be twisted together. If they're not, you certainly can. How you're going to mark these depends on what makes the most sense to you, because the screw terminals up in here, they're not labeled as white, green, and purple. They're labeled as R out, L out, and common. It would have been better if they put the colors, but they didn't. So this one is the L out. So we're going to put a tag on it like this, like we've done before, and we're going to write on there L for left, and then out. And that's all you got to do. You can write on it whatever you want, but the important bit is to remember where it went. So there's one. Now we're going to do the whites, which are above it. And again, if I wasn't making a video, it'd be easier. So there's the white wires. And sometimes when you take these out of the connector, because they've been tightened down under a screw, they'll be all kind of mashed up a little bit. So you can take a second and twist them back together nicely so they stay together as they're supposed to. Put another tag on this one, and this would be R out. And now we're going to do the last one, the purples. So the purple ones, you have these two big devices here. These are capacitors. And buried down in between the capacitors, down here, where it's really hard to see, right here, is another one of the big aluminum screw connections. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to loosen this. We're going to take the purple wires out. We're going to twist them together just a little bit so they don't come loose. We're going to take another piece of blue tape. We're going to put that around the purple wires, and we're going to write on there common. And that's all there is to it. Now we've disconnected all of the wires that we need to disconnect from the power supply amplifier module, and now we need to remove it from the wall housing. This is held into the back of the wall housing on the same little plastic standoff goodies that the Chime module was held on to over here. These are a little bit larger, so they may not come off quite as easily. And also, I'm standing off to the side, which makes it even more tricky. So what you have to do is you have to find a place to grab it, and then you got to kind of pull it forward the best you can, and it popped out. Yours may not be that easy. These little standoffs in this mock-up have been used lots of times. Yours may have only been installed once and never taken off, so they might be in better condition, but that's basically what you have to do. So let's put this down on the workbench and review a little bit so you can see better. All right, so in this close-up of the power supply amplifier module, we'll start at the top. So here are our first big aluminum screw connection. On the board down below it says R out. That's where the white wires were connected, and we labeled them as R out. The next one says L out, which were the green wires, and that's how we labeled the green wires. And down here, tucked in between the two capacitors, is the third one. And on the board down here below underneath the black wires, it says common right here, and that's where the purple wires were connected. So let me show you how this works. So here we have 3 miscellaneous green wires. Wait, pop quiz, where do the green wires go? The green wires go on left out. That's this one right here. So before we took them out, these were, or at least the ones in the mock-up, were inserted into the screw connection like this. Tighten this down. Just like that. That's almost exactly what it looked like. And when we went to disconnect it, we used our flat blade screwdriver. We loosened the screw in the center a few turns. If you turn it too many times, the centerpiece will fall out. So don't do that. Just loosen it enough just to get the wires out. And then all you got to do is pull them and they come straight out. When it comes time to put them back in, guess how you do that? It's exactly backwards. You put the wires in the connection like this, get them pushed all the way through so a little bit of the wire sticks out on this side, and then you tighten down the screw a little bit. Now, when you tighten down the screw, we're not building a bridge that cars are going to drive over. We're just putting a few wires inside the connector, so all you got to do is snug it down a little bit. That's all you need. Don't want it to be loose, don't want it to be too tight. Just like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, you want it just right. The other thing to be aware of, which does not matter that much for what we're doing today, but you may want to know for in the future. See this green thing right here? And it has a white stem on it here, and then it's green, and there's a little spring and all this over here. This is actually an on-off switch. And if we push this and it pops out, or it was already out, if we push it and it pops out, now the amplifier power supply module is turned off. If we push it in, it stays in. Now this is turned on. So this is how this is the main on-off switch for your entire system. If you turn this off, you turn off this, it turns off the MC902, turns off the doorbell, turns everything off. To turn it back on, you do this. When you're making these connections, this could be on or off, it doesn't matter, because remember, the most important first thing that I had you do, and I explained why, was turn the circuit breaker off. Before you get ready to package this up for shipment, we need to put the faceplate back on the MC902 master station because it protects the speaker cone, this circuit board here, the display, and so forth. And it's better to put this back on before you wrap it up to ship it. To do this, it's a little fussy because all of these little buttons have to fit through all the little slots in the faceplate. And they have a tendency, they wiggle around a little bit. So if you do it carefully and you just pop it on like this, most of the time, most of them will go right through. Sometimes you'll get one that's a little stubborn and it'll get pushed off to the side a little bit, get caught underneath the slot. If you do that, use a really small screwdriver or something and sort of reach in there and push it back so it's lined up correctly and it'll pop back on. I know I made it look really easy because I've done it, I don't know, 1,000,000 times. So, you know, that's the way that goes. It's practice, but it's good to put this back in place before you package it up. So there you have it. That's how you remove an MC902 music and sound stereo music master station, a Chime module, and the MC902 power supply amplifier module out of the wall housing so you can send it off to get it fixed. I hope you found this interesting and maybe for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications. And every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.